Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to a time of betrayal, blood, and long-forgotten oaths. The year is 1312. The world is changing. And somewhere among the ashes of a broken brotherhood, one man begins a journey no knight was ever meant to take. His name is no longer known. His cross has been stripped, his honor outlawed, and his fellow brothers, those few still clinging to their vows, have vanished into chains or flames. But he survives. Not to fight. Not yet. He runs. Runs far from the cities where kings and popes bicker over gold and God, all the way to the edge of the known world, and then beyond it. The story of the last Templar who washed ashore on a distant coast, where samurai reigned, katana gleamed, deaths came in silence, and honor ran so deep it could cut sharper than any blade he had ever known. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to a dim orange sky, smoke curling above what's left of a once great fortress. Stones still warm from fire press against your back as you lie among the dead, your armor dented, cracked, and no longer shining. Blood, some of it yours, sticks to your neck like glue. The final purge has come, and the order is broken, not by enemies on the field, but by the very church that once blessed your blade. The year is 1312, and Pope Clement V, under pressure from King Philip IV of France, has officially disbanded the Knights Templar. Some call it divine justice, others a political assassination. Historians still argue whether the order was truly guilty of the heresies accused: idol worship, secret rituals, spitting on the cross. Truth? Lies? At this moment you don't care. You're alive, barely, and so you crawl. First across the scorched courtyard, then through a breach in the chapel wall. A week later, hidden in the robes of a Franciscan monk you once protected in battle, you slip out of France beneath a false name. The irony doesn't escape you. Once a knight in shining armor, now reduced to borrowing holiness just to survive. You move east, toward the bustling Italian ports. Word spreads of a Genoese merchant fleet heading to the Far East, beyond the Silk Road, past Persia, to lands only whispered about in fortress libraries. You offer your services as a guard. They hesitate. Your accent betrays your origin, but gold speaks louder than suspicion, and your sword arm, despite its scars, still moves fast. The voyage is brutal. Nights are spent below deck with crates of cinnamon and spoiled wine. The stink of mold blends with salt air and sickness. Somewhere near the Indian Ocean, you begin coughing blood. One sailor ties garlic around your neck and calls it a healing knot, though it mostly just makes you smell like roasted lamb. By the time you reach the coasts of what they call Cipangu, Japan, you've forgotten the sound of Latin prayers, replaced by the slap of waves and the groans of a hull begging not to split. But it does. A typhoon hits 2 days from shore. The kind locals later call a kamikaze, divine wind. Ironically, it's the second time divine winds try to kill you. You cling to a barrel, armor rusting even as you wear it. The storm hurls you toward an island you cannot name, populated by people who stare at you with silent calculation. You wake on sand, alone. No banner, no cross, just a foreign sun and the sound of water you can't bless. Later, when you try to stand, you fall face first into the surf. A group of villagers gathers at a distance. They don't shout, they don't help, they just Watch. Perhaps it's the armor, or the color of your eyes, or maybe you look more ghost than man. Eventually, someone steps forward. A man in cloth robes, face unreadable. His right hand rests near the hilt of a long curved sword. Not like the ones you know. This blade is elegant, purposeful, like it was designed for poetry and punishment in equal measure. You notice how everyone else defers to him. He doesn't speak. He only nods. You're dragged away. They don't kill you. Not yet. Which, frankly, is an improvement. You spend 3 days tied beneath a wooden shelter, fed rice and water in silence. At night, you stare at the stars and wonder if anyone back home would believe this. The priest who told you salvation came through suffering might find this poetic, or idiotic. You can't remember which. On the 4th day, you're taken to a mountaintop temple. It smells of incense and old wood. A monk greets you, bows low, then gestures for your shackles to be removed. No one explains anything. But the silence doesn't feel hostile anymore. It feels structured, as if every movement, every breath, is part of a rule book you've never read. They give you a place to sleep, a small mat, a bowl of miso soup, and for the first time in years, no one asks you to kill. You wake before the sun, not from duty or training, but from the sheer unfamiliarity of peace. The thin mat beneath your back doesn't creak. The air smells of cedar, smoke, and rain-soaked stone. There are no bells tolling for prayer, no clanking armor in the halls, just the faint rustle of wind brushing through bamboo, and the occasional caw of a bird you can't name. You sit up slowly, muscles aching not from battle, but from sleep. Your armor is gone. Not stolen, just set aside, cleaned even, hung carefully in the corner like a relic. The rust has been scrubbed. A tear in the leather strap has been mended with precise stitching, the kind only a disciplined hand could make. Someone has cared for it, though you doubt they revere it the way you once did. A bowl of rice porridge waits outside your door. No one is there to deliver it. No voice calls you to breakfast. It's just assumed you'll notice. You eat in silence. The grains are warm and bland, but after weeks of salt meat and seawater, it feels like a feast. Later that morning, a young monk leads you through the temple grounds. He doesn't speak your language, and yet nothing feels lost in translation. He gestures, you follow. He bows, you bow back. Somewhere along the path, he stops beneath a tree and picks up a fallen blossom. Pale pink. He places it gently in your palm, then continues walking. You don't know what the gesture means. A greeting? A blessing? A warning? But you keep the blossom tucked inside your robe anyway. It smells faintly like springtime in France, the kind of scent that once made you think of vineyards and midday naps in soft grass. Memories that now feel like they belong to someone else. The monk brings you to a wooden platform overlooking the valley. It's a training ground. 3 young men in linen robes are practicing with long wooden swords. Shinai, you later learn. Their feet shuffle across the floor with deliberate grace. Each swing is silent but precise. No roaring, no battle cries, just breath in, breath out, strike. You've seen countless drills before, the clumsy lunges of squires, the polished rehearsals of knights before ceremonies. But this is different. There is no flair, no showmanship, only purpose. One of the trainees loses balance. The master, an older man with a shaved head and a face carved from stone, says nothing, He simply adjusts the student's posture with 2 fingers and steps back. You recognize that kind of discipline. It reminds you of the Grand Master of your chapter, a man who once made you scrub blood from the chapel floor with your own tunic after you killed a prisoner without orders. To serve God is to serve restraint, he said. You didn't understand him then. You barely understand him now. But here, in this silent courtyard, something about it makes sense. That afternoon, you're given a task. Sweep the walkway between the training yard and the temple shrine. No one tells you why. No one watches. You do it anyway. There's something oddly comforting about it. The feel of the broom, the rhythm of the strokes, the way the pebbles whisper as they slide across wood. For a moment, it feels like penance, but not the kind barked at you by priests. This is quieter, more human. By sunset, your body is sore again, not from killing, but from care. Later that evening, the monk who first guided you brings you to a small shed behind the temple. Inside is your armor, and something else. A simple robe, folded neatly atop a low bench. He gestures to it. You understand. Your old life is to remain in the shed. You bow, take the robe, and slip it on. It fits poorly, but it fits. From the corner of your eye, you see your sword, your longsword, resting against the far wall. Cleaned, untouched, revered maybe, or at least respected, but not used. You wonder if it misses you. That night, as you lie on the mat and listen to the crickets outside, your mind drifts. Not to battles won or enemies vanquished, but to the last time someone looked at you without fear. Maybe it was the monk. Maybe it was the boy in the village who watched you arrive, eyes wide, fingers gripping his mother's sleeve. The church once taught that salvation came only through confession and communion. But here, in this strange land of curved swords and gentle silences, you begin to suspect that maybe salvation can also arrive, in the form of sweeping a path, or being handed a blossom with no explanation at all. Historians still debate whether foreign knights ever made it to feudal Japan. The records are scarce. But oral stories remain, of pale-skinned warriors who came from the sea, bringing steel, sorrow, and something else. Change. And you? You are beginning to change. You just don't know it yet. You begin to understand slowly that this temple does not expect you to prove yourself. There are no commands, no chants to recite, no vows to renew under threat of exile. Each day is the same. Wake before the sun, eat in silence, complete a task, sweep a path, chop firewood, fetch water from the well and carry it, sloshing and cold, back up the gravel trail. The repetition is maddening at first, but over time, something shifts. The quiet stops feeling like absence. It starts to feel full. Your hands adapt quickly, perhaps too quickly. When the monks show you how to bind rope or patch old sandals, you do it without hesitation. A lifetime of discipline from the order has made you a quick learner, though you suspect these men have no idea that you once swung steel through flesh for a cause now buried beneath papal wax and royal lies. One morning, the elder monk, the same one who first greeted you with bowed head and steady eyes, calls you to sit with him near the temple's pond. He doesn't speak. He just pours tea, slowly, deliberately, and he lets the silence bloom around you like steam from the cup. You remember a similar ritual from home, wine in a chalice, words in Latin, hands held out in reverence. But this feels different. There is no god hovering above this ritual, no fire or brimstone, just a man, pouring tea, listening. He places the ceramic cup in front of you, not pushing it forward, not demanding you drink, just placing it, like an offering. You raise it, nod once, and take a sip. The tea is bitter, earthy. It tastes like roots and wind and something older than sermons. The elder finally speaks, not in words you understand, but in a soft cadence, a rhythm that feels like a lullaby or a memory. You watch his hands as he speaks. One points skyward, then back to the earth. He touches the scar on your wrist, then taps his own chest. You don't know the words, but you understand the meaning. You are here, and that is enough. Later that day, a monk gives you a brush and a sheet of paper. He motions for you to write. You hesitate. Latin? French? What could possibly matter here? Still, you grip the brush. It feels clumsy in your hand. Not like a sword. No weight, no balance. But you draw the curve, the arc, the horizontal slash. You remember a prayer from childhood and try to write it, but the ink bleeds, turns soft, unreadable. The monk takes the paper, studies it. Then he draws beside you. His hand moves like a dancer, graceful, sure. He writes a character you've never seen before, then another. He hands you the brush again. You try to copy it. Your first mark is too heavy, the second too fast, but the third is something else. The monk smiles, and you feel a ripple of warmth in your chest. That night, you dream of ink instead of blood. Weeks pass. You stop counting them. The sword remains untouched in the shed. Your hands grow calloused from different labor now, raking, carving, even tending to the temple's small vegetable patch. You learn the names of herbs by their smell. You distinguish birds by their calls. Somewhere between one sunrise and the next, you begin humming, just softly. A tune you once heard a cook whistle in a Templar outpost by the sea, and then one day they give you wood. 2 sticks, actually. Seine. You know what this means. The training begins without ceremony. No speeches. No titles. The older monk simply stands before you, wooden sword in hand, and waits. You raise yours, awkwardly. You've held long swords since boyhood, blades that required 2 arms and thunder in the lungs. These feel like reeds. He moves first, 1 step, then a tap to your shoulder. You didn't see it coming. Again. He moves. Tap to your knee. You grimace. You swing wildly, out of habit. He steps aside, doesn't even block. You stumble forward, nearly falling into the koi pond. The other monks chuckle quietly behind their sleeves. You don't feel humiliated. You feel interested. And so it goes. Day after day. Training not for war but for presence, for breath, for control. You learn that with the Seine there is no need for strength, only intention. Historians still debate how much of samurai discipline was martial and how much was spiritual. Whether Bushido, the way of the warrior, was truly a code as rigid as it's now believed, or merely an ideal retroactively imposed on centuries of complex feudal life. But standing barefoot on the platform each morning, feeling your body move in sync with breath and purpose, you begin to believe the ideal is worth chasing. One afternoon, as you rest beneath a maple tree, the elder monk sits beside you. He points to your hand, then draws a line across the air. A sword. You nod. He points to your chest, then to your head, then again to your hand. A blade must come from here, he seems to say, not just from here. You remember how you were trained. Strike fast, strike hard, obey, serve. But this is something else. This is learning how not to strike, how to let the blade sleep until it's truly needed. And for the first time you think, maybe you are not a knight anymore. The days grow longer. The air shifts. Bamboo rustles in softer winds now, and the nights arrive with a scent of plum blossoms. You begin to mark time not by calendars or feast days, but by the feel of the earth underfoot. When the rain grows warmer, when moss creeps higher on the stone steps, when the tea leaves change flavour from bitter to floral, you've stopped asking yourself when you'll leave, because for now, you're not even sure you want to. But the past doesn't vanish. It just waits, and it finds you again in the most unexpected way. It begins with the arrival of travellers. A procession, actually. Not monks this time, but samurai. You hear them before you see them, the heavy hoofbeats on stone, the barked orders, the rasp of armour being adjusted. It's the first time in months you've heard voices that carry command the way knights once did, and though you no longer wear your cross, some part of you straightens instinctively. They come bearing gifts, lacquered boxes, bolts of silk, preserved fish in ceramic jars, offerings for the abbot. But beneath the ceremony, there's tension. You can sense it in the way the guards watch the trees. Something is brewing. Among them is a younger samurai, perhaps not much older than you were when first knighted. He moves with pride but not arrogance, sharp eyes, tight jaw. As he passes you in the courtyard, he glances sideways, not in disdain, not even suspicion, just curiosity. Later you learn that these men come from a nearby province. The local daimyo, feudal lord, has sent them to request the temple's assistance in securing a convoy route. Bandits, they say, disruptions in the mountains, thieves, maybe rebels. No one's sure. It's not your concern. You're told to continue your training, your chores. But something in the samurai's tone that night, when you overhear him speaking with the monks, stirs something old in your chest. He describes the ambushes, the cold efficiency, the marks left behind, the blade work. You know that kind of precision because you've used it. And the silence after he finishes, you know that silence too. The kind that lingers in command tents when officers know a war is coming, but have no orders yet. The following morning, you're approached by one of the monks, a younger one, still soft in the shoulders, but eyes like flint. He hands you a folded piece of cloth. Inside is a sash, not ornate, but dark, tightly woven, the kind used by temple guardians. A gesture, a request. You nod, not as a knight, not as a soldier, just as a man being asked to stand. And so, you follow the samurai into the foothills. The path is steep, winding through cedar forests and narrow ridges. The mist clings to your skin like memory. You carry no armor, just the robes. And your sword. Yes, the sword. Not the longsword of Europe, still resting quietly in the temple's shed. This is something else. It's not quite a katana, yet. The monks gave it to you some days ago, a practice blade, heavier than theirs, a little straighter than most. A compromise, a conversation between two smiths who will never meet, one from the hills of Burgundy, the other from a hidden forge in Kyushu. You've spent nights running your fingers along its edge, not to test sharpness, but to feel the story in the steel. You don't know it yet, but this moment, this fusion of East and West, will become the seed of something greater. For now, though, it is simply a tool. The ambush comes just before dusk. You and the others are travelling in near silence, a few paces apart, when the first arrow whistles through the trees. It doesn't hit anyone. It wasn't meant to. It was a signal. From the cliffs, masked figures drop like shadows. Blades flash, too fast for warning. The samurai move quickly, elegant, purposeful. You follow, not out of instinct anymore, but out of a strange stillness. You don't yell, you don't pray, you don't even hesitate. Your blade meets another mid-air, metal on metal, spark on spark. You step aside, pivot, let the attacker's momentum carry him off balance. He stumbles. You strike once, only once. It's the cleanest movement you've ever made. The fight ends as quickly as it began. A few bandits scatter, a few remain. The samurai regroup, one is wounded. The rest nod in silent approval, but the young samurai, the one with sharp eyes, watches you longer. He says nothing. Just walks over and picks up your sword, studies the curve, the balance. Then, with both hands, he returns it to you. Not as a test, not as a threat, but as recognition. Historians still debate how foreign techniques may have influenced Japanese swordsmanship, if at all. Some dismiss the idea entirely. Others point to irregular blades in regional museums. Too thick, too heavy, not quite katana, not quite tachi. They call them anomalies, but anomalies always have origin stories. You may never be written into their scrolls. But this night, this single silent nod of respect will outlast 1,000 names carved into stone. As you make your way back down the mountain, the mist clears. The moon rises behind you, casting long shadows across the trail. You don't feel triumphant. You feel tempered. And in the echo of that one clean strike, you hear a truth you hadn't faced until now. You are still a warrior, but not the same kind of warrior you once were. By the time you return to the temple, the night has fully claimed the valley. Lanterns flicker along the pathways, casting gold puddles onto stone. The gates close behind you with a gentle creak, and the wind carries the faint scent of burning cedar. Inside your sleeves, your arms ache, not from the weight of combat, but from the restraint it required. No one greets you. No feast, no victory song. Just the same calm silence that has greeted every dawn since you arrived. And yet something is different. As you walk past the outer hall, you catch sight of the elder monk, seated just as always, back straight, hands resting calmly in his lap. But tonight, he raises one hand and beckons you forward. You sit. He doesn't ask about the ambush, doesn't ask if you drew blood. Instead, he takes a strip of parchment and places it between you. A brush, inkstone. You blink. For a moment, you expect some symbolic task. A lesson in humility, perhaps, but he simply points to your sword, then to the paper. You understand. He wants you to name it. Back in the order, naming a sword was discouraged. Superstition, they called it. Weapons were tools, not companions. But soldiers always named their blades anyway. Quietly, in whispers. Names that never made it to the armory ledgers. Names like Faithless or Mercy. Some knights even carved words into their hilts, scratched Latin beneath the pommel like secret prayers. But here it's not superstition, it's intention. You stare at the blade. It's neither your European longsword nor a pure katana. A chimera, a bridge, the first of its kind, at least in your hands. You dip the brush in ink, hesitate, then draw 3 careful strokes. The monk leans in, eyes narrowing, and then, He smiles. You've written something that sounds like Shizuka, which, as you later learn, means quietude or tranquility. You nearly laugh. That's not what you meant to write. You were trying to recall a Latin phrase about balance, but the irony is not lost on either of you. The blade has found its name, even if it wasn't the one you chose. Word spreads quickly through the valley that the temple's foreign guest fought alongside the samurai and held his own. Children peer at you from behind the garden wall. A few bold ones wave. The cook begins serving you slightly larger portions, as if to say, "Well done," without ever saying it. But not everyone is so quietly impressed. One morning, as you finish splitting wood by the river's edge, a new figure appears. Robes darker than the others, a different posture, less humble. He approaches, not with hostility, but with purpose. A samurai, yes, but one with a sharper edge. His presence doesn't provoke fear exactly, but caution, like a blade in its sheath, visible, ready. He gestures to your sword, then motions for you to follow. You do. He leads you to a clearing just beyond the temple's rear gate. No one else is there. No audience. No monks. Just two men and the quiet hum of insects between them. He draws a katana, not fast, not threateningly, but deliberately, and sets the sheath aside. Then he waits. You've seen this before. This is not a duel. This is a test. You unsheath Shizuka and take your stance. The moment lingers. Your breath slows. The forest stills. Then he moves. He's fast. Faster than the younger samurai you fought beside. His cuts are precise, almost surgical, not driven by aggression but by sheer control. You parry, step, pivot. Your blade hums. Twice your wrists vibrate from the impact, but you hold your ground. Minutes pass, or maybe seconds. It's hard to tell. Then suddenly, he stops. Blade lowered, he studies you, and for a brief moment you think he might speak. Instead, he sheathes the katana in one fluid motion, nods once, and disappears into the trees. You exhale. Only then do you realize you've been holding your breath. That night, the abbot visits your chamber for the first time. He says nothing at first, just watches you polish the blade with soft cloth. After a while, he places a small scroll on the mat beside you. Then he leaves. You unroll it. The characters are written in elegant, practiced strokes. You can't read them all yet, but you recognize a few. The names of seasons, of wind, of stillness. Beneath them, one symbol drawn larger than the rest. You point to it the next morning. Ask the younger monk what it means. He pauses, then says, "Mu," nothingness. You blink. Nothing? He smiles gently. Not empty, open. Historians still debate how much Zen Buddhism shaped samurai philosophy. Whether the fusion of stillness and swordplay was born from spiritual devotion or necessity. Some suggest it was later mythologized to romanticize violence. But here, in this temple where a warrior's breath can be as sacred as a prayer, the line feels blurred, or perhaps erased. You begin to understand that stillness is not the absence of motion. It is motion mastered, and in this stillness, you start to feel something you haven't known in years. Belonging. You now wake without needing the sun to wake you. The rhythm of temple life no longer feels foreign. It fits like an old tunic, softened by wear. You sleep lighter, breathe deeper, move with fewer wasted motions. When you first arrived, you counted the days since fleeing France. You tracked them by stars, by moon phases, by the rough lines scratched behind your chamber door. But somewhere along the way, you stopped. Not out of forgetfulness, but because you no longer feared forgetting. The past hasn't vanished. It sits with you still, at the edge of each breath, like the weight of a sword still present even when sheathed. One morning, you're asked to help the blacksmith. This surprises you. Not because of the labor, you're no stranger to it, but because it is the first time since arriving that someone here has looked beyond your role as warrior or guest. The monks see something else in you now, a set of hands that once shaped steel as much as they swung it. You follow the request with a quiet nod, and later, when you step into the smithy, the heat hits you like a memory. The furnace glows with the same pulsing rhythm you remember from childhood, the orange-red heart of every forge you ever knew. The scent of iron dust, the sting of coal smoke, it's all here, unchanged by distance or culture. And then there's the anvil. You reach for a hammer, fingers closing around its smooth wooden grip like welcoming an old friend. The resident smith is a squat, older man, with a scar that divides one brow. He doesn't speak a word to you that first day. He just watches. Then he hands you a length of folded steel. You recognize the layering technique immediately. This is tamahagain, Japanese jewel steel. It is both beautiful and unpredictable. You remember reading once that it could take weeks just to smelt a single usable bar. The rest, discarded. Perfection through waste. In Europe, you learned to forge blades for mass, for war. Long swords, broadswords, arming swords, tools to be massed and wielded by whoever had coin. But here, every blade is an heirloom, not a weapon, a soul. You heat the steel, raise the hammer, and begin. The sound rings out through the valley, different from a training strike, sharper, deeper, the rhythm of birth. The monk who brought you the sash visits that evening. He doesn't ask what you forged. Instead, he watches you file down the spine of a blade with slow, even pressure. He makes a gesture, a slicing motion across the palm, then up the forearm. You recognize it as a kata from the dojo, a specific strike. You nod, then show him how this blade's curve has been slightly adjusted, designed for a quicker draw, a slightly different angle of parry, a mix between your memory of the European falchion and the balance of the katana. He raises his brows. You both laugh quietly, not at each other but at the shared absurdity. A knight of a forgotten order, now blending steel in the hills of Japan. What would the Grandmaster have said? Probably that you'd lost your soul. But your hands tell you otherwise. You forged 3 blades that week, each one better than the last. Not faster, just more honest. On the 4th day, the smith finally speaks. One word, Meijin. Master. You shake your head, protesting. He shrugs and goes back to work. You begin to attract attention, not just from monks, but from outside the temple. Younger samurai ride up the mountain seeking to see this gaijin who works steel like ink. They come with skepticism, but stay to watch. One asks if you'll forge him a blade. You refuse. Not out of pride, but principle. You're not ready. He bows in understanding, but one night a different visitor arrives. The young samurai, the one with sharp eyes, the one who first noticed you in the courtyard, returns. He enters the forge, sits on the floor, and removes his sword, places it before you, then removes its scabbard and sheath, exposing the blade completely. This is an act of enormous trust. In some traditions, even reverence. You examine the weapon. It is fine, but aging. The edge nicked, the curvature slightly off. A weapon with a past. He says something in slow, deliberate Japanese. You catch only fragments. Old soul, new edge. Together. You nod. This you will do. For 3 days you do not leave the forge. You sleep in shifts, eat little. You strip the blade, reset its core, recast the edge using a folded technique no one here knows. Layers of steel with differing carbon contents, quenched with a method from your childhood. You name the finished blade quietly, Koin, meaning deep flame. You do not carve it. You do not boast. You simply bow as you return it. The samurai accepts it with equal silence. Historians still question whether Japanese blades ever incorporated foreign metallurgical techniques. Most reject the idea. Too proud, too precise, too isolated, they say. But blades don't lie. And somewhere in a dusty vault in northern Japan, an unnamed sword rests, its core too flexible, its grain too strange, its resilience unmatched. That night, you sit by the river with shizuka laid across your lap. You touch the handle, still worn from your own sweat and practice. And you wonder, are you a warrior who learned to forge again? Or a smith who learned to stop fighting? Maybe neither. Maybe finally, you are simply whole. You begin to understand that the heaviest burden is not the armor you wore, nor the sword you carried, but the silence of having nowhere to belong. Yet here, between the hiss of water on hot steel and the gentle brush of a temple broom, you've carved out something unexpected. Stillness. And stillness, you're learning, is not the same as idleness. The temple's forge becomes more than a workshop. It becomes a meeting ground. Monks stop by with broken tools and hopeful glances. Young villagers bring old blades for reshaping. Even a wandering poet once brings you a small iron bell, rusted and cracked, and asks you if it can ring again. You fix it. It rings soft and low. The poet weeps. You don't understand why, but somehow you do. Soon, you're known not as the foreigner, but the one who shapes steel. You're still not fluent in the language, but your hands speak loud enough. One afternoon, the abbot visits the forge. He carries no tool, no request, only a folded cloth. Inside is a scroll, older than any you've seen. The paper is browned with age, the ink delicate. He opens it with care, reveals a set of diagrams, not of meditation, not of calligraphy, but of swords. You lean in, your heart skips. They aren't blueprints, they're philosophies, sketches of blade curvature, balance points, stress angles, edge geometry, not exact, but deeply thoughtful, almost poetic in structure. Lines of text run beside the drawings. You can't read all of them, but one is simple enough. Translated loosely, it reads, "The blade is not forged to kill. It is forged to end chaos." The abbot watches your face. You nod slowly. He smiles, then gestures to the scroll, and then to your forge. An invitation, a challenge, a trust. Not just to replicate, but to expand. You study the scroll for days, not just the lines, but the why behind them. You begin to sketch ideas of your own, shapes that blend the curve of the katana with the tempered spine of a European longsword. A subtle ridge down the center, a slightly altered kisaki, the tip, something that cuts not through force, but by flow. Not just east, not just west, a blade for someone who walks between both. And then, without warning, the rain begins. not the kind that whispers on rooftops, the kind that drums, relentless. Sheets of water fall from the sky, turning stone to river, earth to paste. The monks bring in baskets from the gardens. Children are rushed indoors. And then the riders arrive. 3 of them, cloaked and muddy. Not bandits, samurai, but not from the nearby lord. These come from farther away, another province, one you haven't heard mentioned before. You watch from under the temple eaves as the monks speak with them in low tones. At first, it seems like a simple visit, a message, a request for prayer. But then you see the faces, tension, worry, familiar fear. Later that evening, the abbot calls a meeting, not just monks this time, but villagers, smiths, a few samurai who've aligned with the temple's protection. You sit in the back, hood drawn, arms crossed, just watching. The message is clear enough through gestures, maps drawn in the dirt. A neighbouring warlord is expanding, ruthless. Old customs mean nothing to him. Small temples are being raided, smiths conscripted, iron seized, fields burned to send messages. He's not here yet, but close enough. There is no standing army in this valley, only men with sickles, wooden staffs, and blades made by your hand. You know what war looks like when it wants something. This is a warning. The villagers argue. Some want to flee. Others speak of honour, of ancestors, of duty to stay. You say nothing, because for the first time in your life, you are torn. You know how to fight. You've done it your whole life. But this temple, these people, they never asked you to. They never asked you to be more than what you were becoming, a craftsman, a man of stillness, a man of mu. And yet, there is a sword forming in your mind, one you've never forged, one that only exists for a purpose you swore you'd abandoned, a blade for defense, but also for declaration. You return to the forge that night. You light the fire, alone. You choose your metals deliberately. You layer them slowly, not for beauty, not for praise, but for strength and message. As the steel heats, you reflect on a story you once heard, long ago in Europe, about a sword called Durandal, gifted by an angel, never to be broken. It was myth, of course, but every culture has its sacred blade, its symbol. You are not forging Durandal. You are forging something newer, something real, something born of ash and silence. At dawn, your hands are black with soot, your tunic soaked with sweat, but the blade is formed, not yet sharpened, not yet polished, but it exists. You hold it up to the light as the first sunbeam touches the ridge. You feel the balance shift through your wrist, not front heavy like a Western sword, not as feather light as a katana, but something centered, whole. You say no name aloud, but in your mind one whispers itself forward. Hibana, spark, not to burn, but to begin. Historians still argue whether a single sword could ever symbolize peace, whether such a thing can exist. But swords don't need consensus, they only need a hand to guide them. And you finally have one again. The valley hums with quiet urgency in the days that follow. Word spreads of the coming danger, not shouted from rooftops, but passed like folded notes between hands. Rice deliveries slow. Children are kept home from the temple school. Farmers sharpen tools not for harvest, but for defense. Even the monks begin walking the perimeter more often, their eyes scanning the treetops, their sandals treading heavier. But no one panics. The fear here wears a quieter face. And so do you. You continue work in the forge, but not alone. The young samurai returns, not for a blade, not even for training. He comes just to observe. Sometimes he brings his own steel, a cracked hilt, a loose fitting, small repairs that you both pretend need doing, though you know he just wants to watch you work. One day he brings you a piece of metal from a battlefield, a twisted scrap, once part of a spear. He places it on your bench and simply says a word you now understand well. Kokoro. Heart. You nod and melt it down. Together you shape it into something else, not a sword, not a weapon, just a small emblem, a crest, combining your order's forgotten cross with his clan's crest, a chrysanthemum in bloom. He wears it on his belt from that day forward, not as armor, but as memory. At night you sleep with Hibana beside you. You haven't wielded it yet, not truly, but you feel its weight in your dreams. Sometimes you're back in Acre, sand in your teeth, banners snapping under sun. Other nights, you're in a rain-soaked garden, watching blood pool between cherry blossoms. In one dream, you see your old grandmaster kneeling beside a forge. He doesn't speak. He just nods at the blade you've made, then disappears into smoke. You wake with your hand already gripping the hilt. The abbot calls for you on the third morning. You follow him to the meditation hall, a place you rarely visit. Inside, incense burns in tall brass towers. The floor creaks beneath your feet, ancient and polished by years of knees and reverence. He gestures for you to sit. In front of you is a long, rolled scroll. He opens it slowly. You expect scripture, perhaps another sword diagram, but it's a map, crude, hand-drawn, but clear. It marks the valley, the nearby ridgelines, the river bends, and on one corner, a red ink blotch, spreading toward the village like spilled wine. The warlord's scouts have been seen, not far now. The abbot looks at you, not with fear, not even expectation, just calm inquiry. Will you stand? You think of the church, the banners, the processions, how many times you were told you were chosen, that war was holy, that death for a cause was not just honorable, but necessary. But there is no sermon here, no scripture, no absolution, only a simple question asked in silence, and the quiet acceptance of whatever answer you give. You rise and bow. You will fight, but not for heaven, for here, for them. The preparations begin, not drills, not shouted orders, just purpose. You train a few of the village men in basic footing, grip, movement. You adjust their stances, show them how to watch the hips, not the eyes. You teach them to breathe in a way that keeps fear from locking their limbs. You say little, you correct less, because you know the truth. In battle, even training unravels. What matters is the pause before the blow, the choice. You train the young samurai too. He's faster than you now, his strikes cleaner, but he listens to your words like a pupil would a quiet scripture. You tell him that sometimes the strongest move is not to strike. He doesn't argue, just nods. You walk the edge of the village one last time before nightfall. The wind carries the scent of pine and rain. You see a mother braiding her child's hair on the doorstep. A boy tending a fire with hands too small for the logs he lifts. And farther up, the cook hangs a pot over the fire for tomorrow's rice, as if it's any other evening. It moves you more than any hymn ever has. Historians still debate whether honor truly mattered in war, or if it was simply a story soldiers told themselves to survive the senselessness. But here, under this sky, with this sword and these people, you stop debating. You simply believe. You return to the forge, place Hibana across your knees, and whisper one word in your old tongue, Latin, rusted on your lips. Redemptio. Redemption. Not from sin, not from failure, but from being lost. For the first time in your life, the blade in your hand doesn't represent power. It represents peace, and the willingness to protect it, even if it costs everything. Dawn arrives grey and breathless, as if the valley itself is holding its lungs in suspense. There are no horns, no drums, no banners rising against the sky, only the sound of water dripping from pine needles and sandals brushing dirt paths as villagers take their places, quiet, watchful, uncertain. You've seen war begin in many ways, with fire, with betrayal, with divine speeches shouted from makeshift pulpits. But here, it begins with stillness, and in that stillness, you feel the gravity of what's coming. The scouts return first, 2 of them, winded and pale. The enemy is near. Perhaps a dozen riders, more on foot, armed not just with swords, but with torches. They're not marching, they're advancing like wolves, probing, circling, hungry. The villagers stiffen. A few younger ones clench their makeshift spears so tightly, you worry they'll splinter before first contact. You step forward and raise your hand, not to command, but to steady. No words are needed. They already look to you, not as an outsider now, but as something closer to stone. A presence that does not waver, that has seen fire before and did not melt. The young samurai stands beside you, Cohen sheathed but trembling slightly from anticipation. He has not fought in a true battle before, you can tell. His breath is too fast. His fingers twitch near the hilt. He speaks with the stillness of the sword, but inside, the storm is already building. You lean closer and murmur, not aloud, but just enough for him to catch. Wait for the wind. He doesn't respond, but his shoulders ease. They arrive by midday, not as a horde, but as a message. The first rider comes up the main path, torch unlit, blade unsheathed, the smirk of assumed victory already settled on his lips. He sees the villagers, the monks, the children clutching parents. He sees you. He sees Hibana, resting calmly in your left hand, not raised, not drawn. And for a moment, he hesitates. Then, from behind the trees, the others pour in. It begins. The first clash is close and brutal, not choreographed, not poetic. It's fast and ugly. One of the bandits lunges toward a farmer, but the young samurai intercepts him, blade flashing like lightning, so clean it looks unreal. The man collapses before realizing he's been cut. Another swings toward your ribs. You sidestep, not out of panic but calculation. You parry, not with strength but with angle. Hibana hums through the air, not screaming, not roaring, just singing, quiet and final. You drop him with one stroke, not to kill, just to end chaos. The villagers hold, they falter, yes, but they don't break, because you're there, because they've seen you train, because sometimes the sight of a man who does not flinch is all it takes to hold a line. A torch is thrown toward the granary. You move faster than your age should allow. The flame lands at your feet. You crush it beneath your heel. Not today. You lock blades with a man wielding a crude machete. He grins, expecting resistance, but you pivot, slip beneath his guard, and strike the pommel against his temple. He crumples, unconscious. His blood doesn't stain your blade. The bandits are not disciplined. They expected fear, not resistance. And within minutes, the rhythm of the defense overtakes the panic of the attack. By the time the last two flee into the trees, the villagers remain standing. Bloodied, shaken, some wounded, but standing. You don't cheer. You don't collapse in relief. You simply lower your sword and breathe. One long breath. Later, you help bind wounds. Your hands, once calloused from war, now find new purpose in tending. You rinse a boy's scraped arm. You carry buckets of water from the well. You help dig a small grave for one of the elders who fell, not by sword, but by heart. He died defending the granary door with nothing but a rake in hand. As you press the soil over him, you whisper a prayer. Not in Latin, not in Japanese, but in the space between both. A prayer that doesn't need a god to hear it. That night, the temple is quiet, not mournful, just tired. The abbot sits beside the koi pond, watching the reflections of lanterns ripple on the water. You sit beside him, uninvited but not unwelcome. He gestures toward the sky, then to the village below. You understand. What's been protected is not just land, it's life. He holds out his hand, palm up, and for a moment, you wonder if he means to take your sword, but he simply holds the air, as if weighing it. You place Hibana across your lap, sheath and all. You both watch the water. No words, only silence. And in that silence, you realize you have never felt more whole. Historians often dismiss small battles, especially those never recorded in ledgers or scrolls. What matters to them are conquests, treaties, kingdoms rising or falling. But in a village where children still sleep peacefully tonight, where old monks still light incense at dawn, that quiet victory means everything. And you carry no title now, no banner, no claim, just a blade forged between two worlds, and a promise to stand when needed, no more, but never less. Morning arrives slowly, like a guest unsure whether it's still welcome. The air is heavy with the scent of ash, wet earth, and boiled herbs. Fires smoulder where torches fell. Tools lie where they were dropped in haste, some broken, some stained. The wind moves cautiously through the valley, as if it too remembers the cries of yesterday, and has no wish to disturb the silence left behind. You walk the temple grounds not as a guard, not as a knight, not even as a smith, but as someone quietly assessing what remains. And what remains is life. The villagers sweep debris into piles. Children gather arrows to hand to the samurai like bundles of twigs. A grandmother, wrist wrapped in linen, scolds her son for letting the rice burn during the fight. She does it with a laugh, a real one. They are not untouched, but they are not broken. Neither are you. You return to the forge, not because someone asked, but because your hands want the rhythm again, the fire, the steel, the simplicity of heat and weight and purpose. Hibana rests against the wall now. She's earned her sleep. Her edge is still true, but her spirit feels quiet, like a warrior after prayer. You don't sharpen her. You don't polish. You simply nod to her as you pass. You begin work on farming tools, scythes, hoes, sickles. Your fingers, still swollen from the fight, move slower, but more deliberately. And as you work, others join you. Not to help, not at first, just to watch. A child sits at the entrance, eyes wide, legs crossed. The young samurai stops by and hands you a broken scabbard. You repair it without words. The rhythm speaks for you both. One afternoon a monk appears with a strange object wrapped in silk, a foreign sword. Yours, the European longsword, the one that arrived with you, rusted, beaten, left behind in the corner of the shed like a memory too heavy to carry. You unwrap it with hesitation. The blade is still whole, though dulled. The crossguard is bent, the hilt worn to the core, but the steel hums, deep and low, like a voice you haven't heard in years. The monk bows and leaves you with it. For a while, you just stare. Then you do what you once swore you never would. You place the European sword beside the Japanese blade, Hibana and her older sister, two truths laid side by side, one forged for crusade, the other for balance. You begin to clean the longsword, not to use, not to reclaim, but to understand. That evening, the abbot visits again. You're not surprised. He always comes when the forge is full of questions. This time, he brings no scroll, just a cup of tea. He sits beside you as you polish the blade, watching your hands move with muscle memory and care. He touches the crossguard lightly, then points to the curved katana, then to the space between them. You understand what he means. There's a bridge forming, a fusion, not of metal but of meaning. Later that week, the young samurai returns, this time with a commission, a real one. Not for him but for his younger brother, soon to come of age. He wants a blade that honors both paths, not just Japanese, not just Western, something between. A sword that reflects the journey of someone who stands between worlds. You ask no questions. You simply begin. The weeks pass gently. There are no more raiders. Word must have spread. Or perhaps the strength of the defense sent a different message. But the valley doesn't forget. No one pretends the threat is gone forever. So, they prepare. Quietly. You help build stronger doors for the grain stores. You reinforce the temple gates with iron studs. You teach a few of the older children how to hold a wooden staff, not for attack, but for distance and balance. And you forge, not weapons for war, but tools for life. A kitchen knife here, a rice sickle there, a ceremonial dagger for an upcoming marriage. Each one shaped with the same care as a battlefield sword. Because everything in this valley now carries meaning, even peace. One night, as you walk the ridge above the village, you stop by a tree that leans slightly west, always catching the last light of the sun. You sit beneath it, Hibana across your knees, the old longsword beside you. You reflect, not on battles, but on your arrival. On the way, villagers stared at you like a storm had walked into their fields, on how the monks spoke no words, but still welcomed you, on how, for the first time in your life, you stayed in one place long enough for a blade to grow old beside you. Historians still debate the presence of foreign swordsmen in Japan before the Portuguese. They write of artifacts that don't belong, tales of pale strangers, hybrid weapons found in mountain shrines. Some say it's myth, others call it fabrication. But the steel knows, and you know, because you were there, you still are. The wind brushes the trees. In the distance, a temple bell rings once, low, deep, reassuring. You let the sound pass through you, no longer a knight, no longer a fugitive, not even a guest, just a man, seated between two swords, under a foreign tree that now knows your name. The forge quiets in the days that follow, not from lack of use, but from completeness. You've built what you needed to build, sharpened what needed sharpening, and somehow, without marking the day, you realize you're no longer repairing the past. You're preparing for what comes next. The valley breathes again, not with the gasps of panic, but with the steady rhythm of life reasserting itself. Morning prayers return to gentle chants. The village's laughter carries more freely. Even the koi seem to glide slower in their pond, as if they too sense the change. You spend more time in the garden now, not working, just being. Sometimes you sit near the monk who first brought you the brush and parchment. He no longer instructs. He simply sits, letting the wind stir the sleeve of his robe, as if that alone is enough of a lesson. You learn more from his silence than you ever did from sermons. One afternoon, the young samurai appears again, but this time, something in his posture is different. He wears formal robes, his hair tied back more tightly, his face carefully composed. This is not a social visit, not a forged request. This is ceremonial. He bows deeply, then places a scroll before you, tied with a black thread. You untie it with care. Inside, the writing is sparse but clear. A request, perhaps an invitation, a duel, not of blood, not for death, but for understanding. A keiko, a formal test between two paths, two blades, two philosophies. Your name is written as if it has always been part of their script, and below it, a line drawn with exquisite ink, a curved stroke, like a sword in motion. You pause, then nod. That evening, you visit the shed where your old armor has sat, untouched, for months. It is no longer rusted. Someone has tended it, cleaned the leather, oiled the joints. Even the white cross on the chest plate, faded but still visible, has been gently restored. You touch it, and your fingers come away stained with memory. You do not wear it, but you bow to it, not in allegiance, but in gratitude. Then you leave it in peace. The duel is set for sunrise at the edge of the bamboo grove. There is no crowd, only the abbot, the elder monks, and a few samurai seated in quiet reverence. You arrive first, wearing a simple robe, hibana at your side. He arrives next, blade in hand, his family crest stitched into the collar of his garment. You bow to one another, not as master and student, not as local and foreigner, but as equals. No one speaks. You draw. He moves first as expected, precise, fluid, fast. But you do not counter. You respond. Where he strikes with sharpness, you yield with angle. Where he presses, you turn. Where he retreats, you remain still. The blades hum, not clashing, but conversing. Minutes pass, though it feels like heartbeats. Then, an opening. You step in. He counters. And in that perfect, weightless pause where two edges meet without injury, you both lower your swords at the same time. The duel ends. No victor, no defeat, only understanding. The abbot nods once deeply. The gathered monks bow. The samurai sheathes his sword, then kneels, placing it before you in gesture of deep respect. You kneel too. But instead of accepting it, you slide hibana beside his blade, letting the two hilts rest together like old friends reunited. And in that moment, you know something has changed forever. Not in the temple, not in him, but in you. Because now, for the first time, you are no longer remembering who you were. You are becoming who you are. That evening, as lanterns flicker along the stone path and cicadas whisper across the fields, the abbot invites you to sit beneath the great pine, the one that bends toward the mountains. He brings no scroll, no tea, just a small wooden box. Inside is a single piece of parchment. On it, a name. Your name, but not the one given at birth. not the one you carried into war. A new one, written in elegant brushstrokes with care. You trace it with your fingertip, and for the first time in your life, you feel no need to explain who you are. Not to yourself, not to God, not to anyone. Historians still argue whether foreign warriors were ever accepted into samurai culture. Most records are silent. Some scrolls show pale figures in the background, half drawn, half erased. No names, no legacy. But sometimes history misses the quiet truths, the truths whispered at dusk, the ones etched into steel instead of paper, the ones that live not in bloodlines, but in honor. You rise from the pine tree with that truth in your chest, and though you are no longer a knight, you still carry a code, not written, not sworn, but lived. Autumn descends upon the valley not with sudden chill, but with color. Maple leaves flare into reds and golds. The bamboo groves whisper more crisply in the breeze. The mornings come with a mist that clings to the robes of the monks as they walk the gravel paths. Even the light feels different, softer, more slanted, like the sun itself has grown contemplative. You find yourself walking slower, speaking less, not out of fatigue, but because every moment feels heavier now, fuller. Even silence seems to echo. In the temple forge, the flames are steadier, not roaring. You no longer chase heat, you guide it. You work with few emotions, measure twice, hammer once. Then, just wait. You no longer reach for perfection. You reach for presence. The villagers begin preparing for the harvest. Rice paddies ripple under the wind, ready to be cut. Children tie bundles of herbs to dry in the sun. The cook starts boiling broths before sunrise. Bones, miso, roots, thick, fragrant, comforting. You help where you're needed. Sharpen a sickle here. Patch a basket there. Quiet work. Satisfying. One morning a boy runs to you holding something wrapped in cloth. He's breathless, beaming. A gift, he says, though he struggles to find the right words. You unwrap it slowly. It's a carving, rough but thoughtful. A wooden figure, a man in robes, holding a curved sword, standing on one side of a bridge, on the other side a pine tree. Between them, a small lantern. It's you, and the path you now walk. You bow deeply to the boy, and he grins so wide his cheeks vanish into his eyes. You keep the figure in the forge, near the place you first laid hibana. Some memories are worth shaping into wood. That evening, the young samurai visits again. He sits quietly by the fire, this time not as a student, not even as a swordsman, but as a man with a question. You can feel it before he speaks, the way he keeps glancing at the coals, as if they'll answer for him. Finally, in slow, careful Japanese, he says, "How did you know when to stop being a soldier?" You don't answer right away. Instead, you hand him a blade, not a weapon, a chisel. You place a piece of wood on the bench between you. He frowns, but he takes it. You gesture. He begins. At first, the cuts are too deep, the lines uneven, the form unclear, but he slows, breathes, begins again. You let the silence teach him what your words cannot. Because you didn't stop being a soldier, you just became something more. The seasons shift further. Cold winds begin curling around the mountains. Snow hasn't come yet, but the birds know it's close. They fly lower. The river runs faster. The abbot gathers the temple community one morning. He announces that winter will be spent in retreat. Fewer visitors, less work, more stillness. You accept this like you accept the coming snow, not as burden, but as rhythm. You prepare the forge for cold months, reinforce the doors, stock the coal, seal the roof. You begin working on simpler pieces, tools, knives, things that need care more than art. You also begin writing, just a little, on scraps of parchment, notes, reflections, fragments, not to send, not to prove, just to keep. Memories that would otherwise be carried only in the tilt of your shoulders or the way you hold a blade. You write about the smell of pine sap on your robe, about the steam that rises from the rice bowls each morning, about the way Hibana feels colder in the winter air. And you write about a name you once had, which no one speaks anymore. You don't mourn it. You just remember it like an old path through a forest you no longer need to walk. One evening, the abbot brings you a folded cloth. Inside is a length of silk, dyed a deep twilight blue, a hori, a traditional overjacket worn by elders and artisans. Simple, modest, but unmistakably earned. He helps you put it on himself, no words, just hands, and silence, and meaning. You bow to him, deeper than you ever bowed to kings. Historians often overlook the lives lived between wars. They prefer to mark time by conquests, treaties, dynasties. But history is shaped in forges, in gardens, in conversations held over quiet fires. It is shaped by those who choose not to carry their blades into every room, and sometimes by those who learn to make the blade mean something new. You stand outside the forge that night, Hibana resting by your side, and watch the first leaf of winter fall, red, whole, at peace. The first snowfall comes not with thunder, but with grace. It begins as mist, barely visible in the cold morning light, then drifts down in delicate flakes that settle on rooftops, tree branches, and the curve of your forge's thatched eaves. The valley falls quiet beneath the blanket, sound absorbed, breath visible, time suspended. You step outside, watching the snow gather on your sleeves. For a moment the world feels paused, as if even the wind is listening. You remember winters in France, cold, damp, unforgiving. Stone walls that trapped heat poorly, chainmail so chilled it burned, snow that mixed with blood in ways you never forgot. But this snow, it brings no death, only stillness. Inside the forge the fire is more companion than tool. You tend it slowly, methodically, keeping it alive more for warmth than work. Work slows in winter, metal shrinks with cold, hands lose precision. Instead, the monks spend more time indoors, chanting, reading, preparing scrolls for the spring. And you? You carve. The young boy's gift, the little wooden figure, has inspired you. You begin shaping small tokens, a leaf, a crane, a pine cone, each one no larger than your thumb. You leave them on doorsteps silently. No one speaks of it. But some of the monks begin leaving incense at your forge in return. It becomes a wordless exchange, kindness for quiet beauty. Even the blade rests this season. Hibana stays sheathed for weeks, resting on its cedar stand near your sleeping mat, more symbol than instrument now. But not forgotten, never forgotten. One evening, the young samurai returns, not in armor, not for sparring. He carries a bundle wrapped in cloth, long, narrow, clearly a blade. But when he unwraps it, what's inside is not a finished weapon. It's the core of a sword, the tang and spine, perfectly forged but unsharpened. Unclothed, he lays it before you like a question, then bows, deeply. Lower than ever before, you understand immediately. He wants you to complete it, but more than that, he wants to share it. You prepare the forge together. Coals fed slowly, air pumped gently through the bellows. No rush, no need. You instruct but softly, through motion, not command. He watches your hands, mimics the angle of your file, studies the way you tilt the blade toward the light to see its imperfections. For the first time, you notice that his breathing matches yours. The forging lasts for days. A new kind of duel, between steel and balance. You fold the edge using your hybrid technique. You use tamahagain, but temper it with a Western cooling method you learned as a boy, using snow, not water, to draw heat gently away from the spine. He sharpens it himself, slowly, carefully, and when it's done, you both sit beside the fire and name it together. You offer a word from your tongue. Fidelis, faithful. He responds with makoto, sincerity. You combine them without debate. Makoteru, a nonsense word, a fusion. But one only the two of you understand. A blade that belongs to both your worlds. Later that week, a traveling storyteller visits the village. He brings tales from far provinces, of uprisings, droughts, politics, but also myths, spirit foxes, ghost trees, haunted armor. At the end of his stories, he shares something strange. He says, with a dramatic whisper, that he once heard of a white-haired foreigner who came from the sea. A man who forged a sword that could not break. A man who walked like a samurai but prayed like no one else. The villagers glance at you. You shake your head and smile. The storyteller smiles too, but doesn't correct himself. Because legends, like steel, take the shape of the fire they're forged in. That night, you find a new note pinned to the inside wall of the forge. A small piece of parchment. 3 characters, handwritten, precise. They translate loosely to one who carries silence. You don't know who left it, but you leave it there because it fits. Historians often ignore the long winters. They leap from one battle to the next, skipping the snow. But the truth is, winter is where men are tempered, where swords rest in their scabbards and find their meaning not in blood, but in pause. You sit beside the fire with hibana across your lap and feel no urge to move. You are not waiting for war. You are not longing for peace. You are simply here. And here is enough. When the snow begins to melt, it does so shyly. It retreats from the rooftops first, sliding in soft sighs down curved tiles and thatched straw. Then from the trees, where blossoms wait just beneath the bark. Then finally from the ground, revealing stones, footprints, and the tender green shoots of early spring. You step outside the forge one morning and realize the cold has gone, not vanished, but lifted, like a burden finally set down. And just like that, the valley breathes again. Spring in this land does not arrive with force. It arrives like a bow, low, respectful, graceful. The cherry trees bloom almost apologetically at first, scattering a few petals, then unfolding all at once in a cascade of pink and white that makes the entire village pause. You pause too. You've seen beauty in cathedrals, in stained glass windows, in the symmetry of long stone cloisters. But nothing like this. The blossoms fall like memory, soft, uninvited, impossible to catch. One lands on your shoulder. You let it stay. The monks host a small festival, a celebration of the new season. Children laugh louder. Rice cakes are prepared with red bean paste. Lanterns, shaped like animals and flowers, swing from strings across the courtyards. The forge is quiet for once, its fire cold, as even you are coaxed away to attend. You sit beside the abbot beneath a blooming tree. He does not speak, but he offers you a small ceramic cup. Sack, clear and warm. You drink. Then he gestures to the scene before you. The children, the blossoms, the laughter. Then to your sword. Then to your chest. You understand. He is saying that this is what your blade now protects. Not empire, not crusade, but this. A small world. Gentle. Worth guarding. Later, when the festival quiets and the drums grow softer, you take a walk through the garden. Alone. You reach the bamboo grove and stop by the same crooked pine you always seem to return to, the one that leans west, toward where your journey began. You sit. A wind stirs the branches, and for the first time in what feels like years, you speak aloud to someone long gone, not to ask forgiveness, not even to remember, just to honor, because memory, like a blade, dulls if unused, and tonight you let it shine. You recall a fellow knight who once taught you how to braid rope while drunk on communion wine, a squire who cried when his boots blistered, a captain who quoted scripture before every fight and cursed louder than anyone when struck. You speak their names, one by one, not to reclaim them, but to release them. You watch a single petal land in the pond and vanish, and that too feels like peace. The next morning, the young samurai arrives again. He brings with him the sword you forged together, makoteru, wrapped in cloth, carried with both hands. He bows low, then kneels. Today he is leaving. He has been called to serve his lord in a distant province. Not war, exactly, but duty, administration, patrol, honor. He says little. You say even less. But when he places the sword in your hands, you know what it means. He is asking for a blessing. You rise, unwrap the blade, and hold it to the morning light. Then, without a word, you return it, tapping the flat side gently against his shoulder, then his chest. He nods. A farewell. A beginning. And as he disappears down the road, the sword at his side, you know your craft will now walk roads you will never see. And somehow that feels complete. That evening you return to your forge. You relight the fire, not out of need, but ritual. You place your old European longsword on the anvil, not to repair, not to revive, to honor. You polish the blade gently, then wrap it in cloth. You carry it outside the village, just before dusk, to a clearing near the waterfall. There, with care, you dig a small chamber into the stone. You lay the blade inside, not as a grave, as a monument, a marker of the path you walked. You press the final stone into place and step back. The waterfall hums, the wind stills, and in the fading light you bow, not to the weapon, but to the man who once carried it, because he no longer needs it. He has you now. Historians rarely record the moments when warriors choose not to fight, when they lay their weapons down, when they forge blades for others, when they become the guardians of quiet lives. But those are the moments that matter most, and under the blooming trees, beside the forge that now burns only when needed, you live such a moment, not with fanfare, not with song, just with breath, just with presence, and that is enough. Spring matures slowly, as if reluctant to hand over its beauty to summer. The blossoms fall like whispers now, not in flurries, but in ones and twos, each landing like punctuation to a sentence you're still learning how to read. You sweep the temple paths more often these days, not out of obligation, but as meditation. Each stroke of the broom becomes a breath, each cleared pebble a soft reply to the voice within you that once only spoke in steel. It's strange, you think, how a man can change shape without changing his scars. They're still there, the old wounds, the faded burns on your knuckles, the ghost pain in your left shoulder from a crossbow bolt you took during the siege of Acre, the small notch in your right ear from a tavern brawl you never meant to win. But they no longer speak of war. They speak of passage. And here, in this place of smoke and prayer, you've learned that passage is more than movement. It is transformation. One morning the abbot finds you reforging a broken chisel. He watches without interrupting, then sets down a folded cloth beside you and walks away. Inside is a scroll, short, unadorned. But when you unroll it, you see it's a request. From a nearby village, smaller than this one, tucked farther into the hills. Their smith has fallen ill. They ask for help, not protection, guidance. You sit with this for a long while. It's been years since anyone asked you to travel, since anyone saw you as a bearer of skill, not just of steel. You think about saying no. You've built something here, a rhythm, a piece. You've earned your silence, but the forge doesn't resist when you bank its coals, and Hibana doesn't protest when you wrap her once more. The journey is short, only a few days. You travel on foot, preferring the quiet rhythm of sandals over hooves. The path winds through green hills and small bridges. Farmers nod as you pass. Children stare, not with fear, but wonder. One girl asks if you're a swordsmith. You pause, then answer, yes, but only when I need to be. At the village edge, you find the forge. It's small. The bellows are cracked. The anvil is chipped, but the fire still burns. The smith lies in a cot nearby, grey-bearded and smiling faintly. He says little, but he clasps your hand with surprising strength and murmurs something in a dialect you don't know. His apprentice bows so low his forehead touches the floor. You get to work. The days pass quickly. You repair tools, sharpen blades dulled by years of harvest, replace rivets on plough handles. The apprentice watches closely, and you begin to teach, not through lectures, but through repetition, through rhythm. You show him how to listen for the change in pitch when steel is ready, how to tell when a quench is too fast, how to wait, not out of laziness, but respect. You leave him with a lesson your grandfather once gave you, back in a French forge full of cursing and smoke. Steel is like a man. It can be bent, beaten, burned. But if you don't understand its core, it will never hold an edge. He nods and smiles. On the final day, you give him a gift, a hammer, balanced and true, made with your hands, from your mold. He bows deeply, eyes wet. You don't stay for the celebration, just long enough to see the forge light rekindled in someone else's eyes. Then, you turn home. When you return, the valley is in bloom again. The monks are repairing the roof. The children are playing beside the river. The forge smells faintly of cherry wood and coal dust. Your forge. But something feels different now. Not diminished. Just expanded. Like the edge of your world has shifted slightly outward. And you realize, it's not just the blade you carry that matters. It's where the blade has been. That night, the abbot joins you for tea. He brings a folded piece of parchment. Inside is a simple ink drawing, a bridge. On one side, a sword. On the other, a lantern. You trace the brush strokes with your fingertip, recognizing both objects. You smile, and for the first time in a long while you ask him a question. Is the sword carrying the light, or protecting it? He considers, then says softly, maybe both. Historians rarely write of blades that never spill blood. They prefer the dramatic, the conquest, the coup, the clamour. But you know now, the sharpest swords are the ones that never need to be drawn. You sit beneath your crooked pine, watching the stars blink into place like distant watchfires, and you feel ready, not for war, not for pilgrimage, but for whatever comes next. You begin waking before the sun again, but for different reasons now, not out of habit, not because of fear, because the quiet is gentler before the light, and in that gentleness something stirs in you, an urge not to fight, not to prepare, but to shape. You return to the forge with the same purpose monks bring to morning chants, not to build something new, necessarily, but to listen for what the steel wants to become. The forge has changed too. It no longer smells only of heat and iron, but of pine ash and cedar, offerings left by villagers after harvests, births, and farewells. They come not for blades, but for symbols, small charms, rings, even needles for sewing. Things that hold meaning in hands rather than holsters. You've become more than smith. You've become part of this place. And yet, one day a scroll arrives, tied with red cord, the kind used for formal announcements. The monk who brings it is cautious, respectful, says it was delivered by courier from a far province. There's no signature. You recognize the seal, though, the stylized chrysanthemum, the young samurai, your student, your friend. You open the scroll in silence. The message is brief, but heavy. His lord has died. A rival clan has moved swiftly, claiming territory by force. Conflict has broken out. The samurai now serves in defense of his people, but he fears what the fighting is becoming, what he is becoming. The message ends with a simple request. Come, not to fight, to witness. You fold the scroll with care. You do not answer it immediately. Instead, you walk the edge of the forge. You touch Hibana, still resting in her place of honor. Then you kneel beside your old armor, folded in cloth, left untouched for years. You place your hand on the breastplate and wait for the question to rise from within. It does not come, because you already know the answer. You prepare quietly. You do not tell the villagers. You do not pack as one going to war. Just one robe, one blade. Before you leave, the abbot finds you on the temple path. He says nothing, only offers a parcel wrapped in linen. Inside is a new sash, dyed deep grey, embroidered at one end with a delicate pine needle. You wear it without ceremony. The road to the province is long and narrow, winding through forests and mountain passes. You pass travellers headed the opposite way, families, merchants, weary soldiers. All speak of unrest, of skirmishes, of fortresses switching hands, but none speak with hatred, only fatigue. When you reach the outskirts of your friend's province, it's dusk. Fires flicker in distant watchtowers. You can feel the land bracing itself, like an exhale held too long. The gates open for you without question. You're not a stranger here. The young samurai meets you at the barracks. He's thinner, older. There's dust in his hair and weight in his eyes. But when he bows, it is not out of obligation. It is out of relief. You sit with him beneath the garrison's cherry tree, barren now, its blossoms long blown away. He doesn't ask for counsel, only company. He explains the situation, The new warlord fights without code, without balance. He burns farms, conscripts children, declares loyalty irrelevant. The samurai has resisted, protected civilians, avoided retaliation, but even stone wears down in the rain, and he fears the sword he carries, Makoteru, the one you forged together, may soon be used not for protection, but revenge. You listen, not to advise, not to fix, just to bear witness. Because sometimes that is the greatest act of love a warrior can offer. To simply say, I see what you carry. That night, he shows you his armor. It bears scratches now, cracks, repairs made in haste. On the chest plate, a faint stain, blood washed clean but never erased. He removes it slowly, gently, as if setting down a heavy truth. Then he places Makoteru beside it. You both kneel before the sword in silence. He places a blossom beside it, not fresh, dried, preserved in lacquer, one from the valley, from your forge, from home. Historians often write of great swords being passed down in battle, of final duels and valiant deaths, of heroes who fall with steel still clutched in hand. But you know now, some swords are passed in quiet moments, not in war, but in decision. And that night, as the samurai leans forward and places his hand on the blade you made together, you know he's made a vow, not to slay, but to remain, to be the warrior who holds the line, who protects without vengeance, who remembers what you taught him, not with words, but with wood and fire. He will fight, yes, but not lose himself. And so you leave the next morning without speaking of it again, because you trust him, because he is now his own blade. The journey back is colder, longer, but lighter. You carry no doubt, no burden, only peace, the kind forged through witness, tempered through presence, sharpened through silence. When the temple comes into view again, its rooftops rising through the fog like familiar hills, you pause. Not because you question returning, but because, in that moment, you realize you never truly left. The temple greets you not with celebration, but with continuity. The bell still tolls at dawn. The monks still sweep the steps with the same rhythm. The forge, dark upon your arrival, roars gently to life once more, as if sensing your return. Nothing has changed. And yet, you have. You carry no new scars, no trophies, no tales of glory. Just a quiet certainty that the world beyond the mountains still stirs, and that your place within it is neither to conquer nor to hide, but to hold. You resume your work slowly, purposefully. The villagers bring you what needs mending: a cracked kettle, a rusted hinge, the clasp of a sandal broken by a child's wild running. These repairs matter more to you now than any sword ever did. They are not symbols, they are useful, and in usefulness there is peace. One afternoon, the boy who once carved you from wood, older now, taller, brings a fishing spear with a bent tine. He's trying to repair it himself. You watch as he attempts to reheat the metal. He's close, careful, but impatient. You don't stop him, not immediately. You wait until the flame burns too hot and the tip curls too much. Then you step in, not to correct, to show. Together, you quench the new shape in cool water. The hiss sings like an old friend. The boy smiles. You do too. That night, he leaves the forge with a working spear and one new thought planted in his hands: that failure, treated with care, becomes learning. In the weeks that follow, spring gives way to summer. The river runs slower. The air turns thick. The monks shift their schedule to avoid the midday heat. And you begin building something. Not a weapon, not a shrine. A bench, just a bench, near the old pine tree that leans west. It takes you 3 days. Cedar planks, joined without nails. Smoothed with river stone. Sanded until the surface gleams beneath your palm. You don't carve your name into it. You don't leave any mark, but you sit on it each evening, quietly. And soon, others begin sitting there too. One by one, sometimes in silence, sometimes in conversation. A grandmother shares dried persimmons with you. A travelling monk hums a tune from a far province. The boy returns with new questions, more thoughtful now. The bench becomes more than wood. It becomes invitation, a space held open for presence. Then, one late afternoon, as you return from the river path with your robe damp from the knees down, the abbot calls for you. He sits beside the koi pond. You sit beside him. Neither of you speak for a long time. Finally, he lifts a small folded cloth and opens it to reveal a stone. A pale, oblong stone, smooth from years of water. He pushes it toward you. It's a gift. You wait for meaning, for explanation. But he gives none. Instead he points toward the forge, then toward the west, then to the stone, and you understand. It's time. Not to leave. Not forever. But to wander again. To bring what you've become to places that have not yet known it. To share stillness in a world that still forgets how to be still. To carry silence, not as a burden, but as a light. You begin your preparations quietly. You clean the forge, seal the tools, leave instructions for the apprentice to follow. You pack lightly, no armor, no keepsakes, only hibana wrapped in its linen sheath. You carry the stone the abbot gave you in your robe's inner pocket, close to your chest, and before you leave, you sit once more on the bench beneath the leaning pine. The wind brushes your face gently. The valley glows golden with late summer light. You close your eyes and listen, not for guidance, just for goodbye. Historians never recorded your departure. There was no procession, no monument, no title etched into stone. But some say, in certain villages deep in the hills, strange swords were found, neither fully curved nor straight, balanced perfectly, edges that hummed when drawn. And in some forges, apprentices still whisper stories of a foreign man who taught them to shape steel by listening, not to fire, but to people. And always, beside the forge, a small stone sat on the shelf, worn smooth, pale grey, untouched, but never forgotten. You travel without a map, not because you are lost, but because the places you now seek are not marked with names. They are measured by silence, by need, by the weight of air in a forge long cooled, by the tremble in a villager's voice when asking if you might know how to mend a broken tool, or a broken moment. Your journey takes you through provinces untouched by war, but not by weariness. Places where memory outweighs metal, where old farmers tend rice fields with hands too stiff for swords, and where even the bravest warriors now kneel beside their grandchildren instead of battle standards. You carry no banner, only hibana, sheathed and quiet at your side. You are not a swordsman, not a smith, not entirely. You are a keeper of calm, a walker of slow paths. One village, nestled between two rivers, welcomes you with suspicion. At first, foreigners are rare here, and word travels faster than footsteps. But you wait. You sleep in a shed near the mill, repair a cart axle without being asked, help an elder bind herbs for winter illnesses. And when the local blacksmith watches you sharpen a blade with snow water, a technique he's only heard of in legend, he finally speaks. "You walk like a ghost," he says. "Maybe," you reply, "but I fix things." And that is enough. You stay for a season. No more. Just long enough to leave behind a stronger hammer, a reshaped hoe, and the memory of a foreigner who listened more than he spoke. Before you leave, a child runs after you with a pouch of persimmons. You accept, you bow, and you walk on. The road becomes your rhythm. You follow mountain passes, bamboo forests, rice terraces cut into hills like stairways for giants. Each new place greets you with different silences, some curious, some cautious, some too tired to question. But every time you stop, you find your place again, in the warmth of a new forge, in the smell of wet stone, in the weight of hibana on your knees at dusk, and in the unspoken understanding that you are not there to change their world, only to hold it still long enough for them to remember what peace feels like. In one riverside village, a woman brings you a broken bell. It once rang at a small shrine in the forest. Foxes used to gather there, she says. Her voice cracks when she speaks of it, like the bell itself. She asks if it can be fixed. You study the crack, the age of the metal, the uneven casting. Then you say something you haven't said in years. Not everything broken must be restored to what it was. She frowns, but waits. You melt the bell down, not to erase it, but to reshape it, into a chime, delicate, subtle, one that sings not with urgency, but memory. When you hang it in the shrine, even the wind seems gentler. You don't stay for the festival they hold that night in thanks. You leave at dawn, while the mist still clings to the grass, but you hear the bell behind you as you walk. Not ringing, breathing. Historians won't tell these stories. There are no empires forged here, no dynasties dethroned. Only a man with tired eyes and a quiet sword, walking from village to village, helping what needs helping. But somewhere, someday, perhaps a child will point to an odd-shaped blade and say, "That was made by the ghost with the white hair." And maybe, just maybe, that will be enough. As summer fades, you feel your legs grow heavier, not from age, from purpose, fulfilled. You return to the valley with the crooked pine, with the forge that still smells of cedar smoke, with the monks who nod, unsurprised at your reappearance. They do not ask where you've been, only whether you are staying, and you answer honestly. For now. Because now is enough. You settle back into the rhythm of the valley, like a leaf returning to the surface of a pond. No splash, just stillness. The forge breathes once more under your hands. You clean each tool, not out of need, but respect. Even hibana, untouched for months, feels like she sighs when unwrapped. The monks don't ask for stories. They've never needed to. Their silence is not ignorance, it's reverence. For the journey, for the choice to return, for the man you've become. One of them, the boy with the eager eyes, older now, sits with you during evening prayers. He doesn't fidget anymore. He listens. You realize you are no longer just a guest here. You are part of the wood grain. One afternoon the abbot approaches. He carries a scroll, worn at the edges. Inside, a simple request from a temple across the mountains. Their forge master has passed away. No replacement, no tools. They ask for a teacher, for a season, no more. The abbot waits while you read. Then he says gently, "We will not lose you. We will simply share you." You laugh, a low sound, unfamiliar, but true. You agree. Because you no longer fear the world outside this valley. You've walked it, you've changed it, quietly. The journey to the mountain temple is easier this time. Your steps are steady, your robe lighter. Villagers greet you along the way, not with fear, but with recognition. Some bring offerings, others only smiles. You arrive at the new temple at dusk. Its forge is quiet, its tools rusted, but its hearth is warm. They give you a small room with a view of the peaks. You sleep without armor, without sword, just breath. In the days that follow, you teach, but you also listen. The novices here know how to strike metal, but not how to read it. You show them how to feel the hesitation in the blade, how to test balance without sight, how to walk in silence before touching iron. You pass along techniques you once protected like secrets, not because they are ancient, but because they are earned. You forge no weapons here, only tools, needles, hooks, bells, and one small blade, a farming knife, curved just slightly like a katana's echo. A young monk, shy but clever, calls it Little Hibana. You let the name stay. Late one evening, while sharpening chisels by moonlight, you hear a visitor's voice at the gate. Soft, hesitant. You turn and find the young samurai. Older, wiser, still carrying Makoteru at his side. He bows deeper than ever before, not out of formality, out of recognition. You both sit by the forge. He says little, but his eyes tell you more than words. Peace has returned to his province. The new warlord was overthrown not by force, but by withdrawal, by refusal to serve, by men like him who remembered what a blade was meant to be. He touches the hilt of Makoteru, not as a threat, as a promise. Then he removes it and sets it in your lap, not to return it, to let it rest. You sheath the sword, then offer him tea. He drinks. You both laugh at nothing in particular, because sometimes peace sounds like the clink of cups, not the clash of steel. Before he departs, he bows once more. This time with no words, only the weight of everything you've shared. As he vanishes into the mountain path, the forge beside you hums, as if it too understands. Historians might say the sword passed from master to student, from west to east. But the truth? It passed from one witness to another, and in that passing, something sharper than steel was forged. Wisdom. And now, as the fire dies low beside you, you feel no urgency, only stillness, only gratitude, only one truth echoing through the coals. You do not need to wield the blade, to shape the world with it. The seasons shift once more. The leaves on the mountain trees begin to crisp and curl. The wind, once warm, now carries the scent of pine and wood smoke. Clouds hang lower in the sky, heavier, slower, like they too are preparing to rest. You feel it in your bones, not pain, invitation. The forge at the mountain temple needs little now. The novices have learned well. You catch them correcting each other gently, using phrases you once spoke without realizing. Let the steel breathe. Don't fear the pause. Balance begins at the shoulder. One evening, You catch them watching you shape a final blade, not for war. A carving knife, small and precise. You gift it to the youngest among them, the quiet one with calloused fingers and eyes that never wander during instruction. He bows so deeply he nearly topples forward. You laugh, and he laughs too. It sounds like water finding stone. When you return to your home valley, the monks are waiting at the temple gate. The crooked pine still leans west, but now there are 3 new benches beneath it. You don't ask who built them. You simply sit and breathe. The boy, no longer a boy, greets you with a flask of plum wine and a grin that says, "You were gone too long." You both share a drink under the stars. He tells you of the forge, how the villagers bring not just tools now, but questions, how they sit with their troubles and mend them beside the anvil, how someone left behind a bundle of sage with a note that read, "This fixed more than my blade." He hands you the note. You keep it, not because it's sentimental, because it's true. The forge is quieter now. You no longer work every day. You no longer feel the need to shape what is broken. You've learned that sometimes the most important mending is done by waiting. Instead, you walk. You greet new pilgrims. You sip tea in the midday light with the abbot, who has grown more wrinkled but no less sharp. And at night you write, not books, not histories, just memories, moments, fragments. A child who laughed when the bell rang again, the hiss of snow touching hot iron. The samurai who bowed lower than a king. You do not intend to publish them, but the act of writing feels like carving your name into the wind, letting the story pass through you instead of holding it too tightly. One night, you take Hibana from her place. You clean her, gently, but you do not sharpen. You do not test the edge. You hold her across your lap and whisper, not words exactly, but thanks. Thanks for staying silent when you needed silence. Thanks for speaking when no other language could. Thanks for not defining you, even as she protected you. And then, in a simple motion, you sheath her, wrap her in linen, and place her, not on the wall, but beneath your bedroll. Not as a tool, not as a trophy, as a companion, resting. One morning you wake earlier than usual. The sky is pale, the forge is cold, but you feel no burden, only clarity. You walk to the bench beneath the crooked pine. You sit with your hands on your knees. You watch the mist rise from the valley. The boy-turned-man comes to join you, saying nothing. He offers you warm rice and pickled plum. You share a meal in silence, and he looks at you, not as a student but as an equal. You smile, and you know, it is almost time. Historians never wrote about this part. They chase kings, trace bloodlines, chronicle cities built and toppled. But the quiet death of a warrior's need to be a warrior, that is history too, unwritten, but no less real. So you sit, the sword beneath you, the fire banked low, the world, still, and you breathe in the day, not as a man preparing for battle, but as a man who no longer needs to fight, because you were the last of something, and now you are the beginning of something else. Morning dew glistens on the wooden steps of the temple as you rise from the bench. Your knees are slower now, your breath shorter, but your posture remains unbent. Like the pine, you walk the path toward the forge, not to light it, but simply to open the door. Let in the air. Let the dust settle where it will. A child from the village waits near the entrance, barely old enough to speak your name, but clutching a dull kitchen blade in both hands like it's a family heirloom. You squat to meet his gaze, smile gently, and take the blade without a word. His eyes widen, not at your face, but at your care. You place the knife on the workbench, motion for him to come closer, and for the first time, you let someone else hold the hammer, not to forge, to feel. He giggles as the weight pulls his arm downward. You guide his hand. He misses the mark, twice. But the third time, the clang rings true, and you smile, not for the steel, but for the boys' laughter echoing across the courtyard. That evening, the villagers gather, spontaneous, unspoken, as if drawn by a common thread, none of them wove intentionally. They bring rice balls, fruit, one cracked flute that wheezes out a crooked tune. There is no festival, no shrine event, no ritual, just presence. You sit near the edge of the gathering, sipping tea made with too much ginger. Someone sets a lantern beside you, then another, then another. The light spills in a soft circle around your seat. One child points up and whispers, "Is he the one from the mountain?" Another replies, "No, he's the one from here now." You hear it, you don't correct it, because it's true. Later, as the stars begin to blink awake, the abbot approaches with the old wooden box, the one you thought had long since vanished. He sets it beside you. You open it slowly. Inside lies your original sword. The European longsword you once buried near the waterfall, cleaned, preserved, wrapped in silk. You trace your fingers along the crossguard, feeling the grooves time carved into it. Then carefully you lift it. You hold it not as a weapon, but as a memory. And beside the villagers, the monks, and those whose lives have intersected with your quiet journey, you stand. You raise the sword once, then set it down on the bench beside Hibana. 2 blades, one from each life, together. You speak then, only once, softly. Both of these carried me here, but I only carry one forward. There is no applause, only bowed heads and silence. The kind that honors, the kind that holds meaning deeper than any spoken word. That night, you sleep beneath the stars, not in the temple, not on your mat, just under the crooked pine, wrapped in a robe older than most of the children in the village. Hibana rests beside you, unneeded but present, and for the first time since the Holy Land, you dream without fire. You dream of waves, of quiet steps, of steel being folded, not for war, but for harvest. You dream of the boy with the hammer, laughing. You dream of a sword that no longer cuts, but heals. And you rest. Not from exhaustion, from completion. Historians will never know where you are buried, if you are buried. Some say you simply faded into the mist one morning, robes trailing like breath. Others claim they saw a traveller in a distant province, teaching children how to mould clay into bells that sang like memory. The truth? It doesn't matter, because you became more than a man. You became a presence, and presence never dies. It simply stays where it's needed, until it's time to move again. The mist rolls in thick that morning, not heavy, not cold, just soft, like breath, like gauze, like the final note of a song that doesn't need to end, just fade. You rise slowly, joints creaking like old wood. The crooked pine watches in silence, as it always has. There is no rush, no summons, no final task, just the stillness before departure. You walk through the temple one last time, fingers trailing along the paper walls, pausing at each familiar place, not to linger, but to acknowledge. The forge, the pond, the bell, the bench beneath the pine. And then, at the edge of the village, a familiar path, one you haven't walked in years, one that leads not away, but inward. The boy, now nearly a man, meets you with a cloth bundle. He doesn't ask where you're going. He only says, "I'll keep the fire banked." You nod, and place your hand briefly on his shoulder, not as teacher, not as farewell, but as recognition. He is ready. The valley will remain cared for. The forge will hum long after you are gone. Your feet find the rhythm again, like an old song remembered. You climb the hills slowly, not because you are weak, but because you are present. You notice the dragonflies skimming the surface of the stream. You listen to the cicadas beginning their slow chorus. You pass an old man fishing with no bait on his hook. You don't interrupt him. He doesn't need to catch anything. He only needs to sit. And you understand. At the crest of the hill, you pause. You look back one last time. The valley glows behind you, wrapped in low fog and soft gold. The temple roof peeks through like a memory. The forge's chimney sends up a single thread of smoke. And beside the crooked pine, two swords, one curved, one straight, resting, together. Not in battle, not in mourning, just at peace. You turn forward and keep walking. No map, no end. Only the path. Only the quiet hush of your robe against the trail. And the distant ring of some other forge, somewhere, calling softly, "Come when you're ready." You will, not as warrior, not as ghost, but as the man you've always been becoming, the last of something, the beginning of something else, the one who walks, not to fight, but to remind the world how to hold stillness without fear. And so, your story ends not in fire, nor in stone, but in footsteps that leave no mark, and a silence that echoes louder than legend. Now, let it all fall away. Let the fire in the forge go dark. Let the sword stay sheathed beneath the pine. Let the footsteps fade along that misty trail where no name is needed. You've journeyed far tonight, not just across mountains and oceans, but across time, memory, and silence. You've walked beside a knight who became more than steel and duty. You became him. You felt the hush of a bamboo forest, the weight of a blade that was never drawn, the warmth of tea shared instead of blood spilled. And you've seen that the truest warriors are not those who win battles, but those who choose not to fight when peace is still possible. Now, your limbs can grow heavy, your breathing slow. There is no more story to chase, no more enemy to watch for, just the soft rhythm of your heartbeat, and the knowing that what's gentle can be strong, what's quiet can be lasting. So, settle in. Let the stars blink open above your mind. Let the whisper of silk robes and temple bells lull you into dreams. The last Templar has walked his path, and through him, so have you. No battles tonight, no endings to fear, only stillness, only peace, only sleep. Good night, traveller. You've earned your rest.